Hi guys, Chris with Microsoft here with another episode of Let's Tech. I apologize for the humming on the audio in the background. I do not know what's going on. I've been troubleshooting a little bit for the last half hour or so. Can't seem to get rid of it, but we've got some hum, and I apologize, but we'll get through it. So this is a kind of an update video to a previous one that was done that has to do with Hyper-V and the replica. And I recently did an update to the replica video probably about a month or two ago, and it had to do with Azure Replica, integrating your Hyper-V replica into the cloud. And we have a couple of new things that have happened with recovery services, some very significant changes that have occurred, so I thought it would be worth to do a kind of a quick video here and talk about some of the new things and stuffs that go into the recovery services. For instance, it's no longer necessary to have a System Center virtual machine manager instance in your environment. So now you can go straight from the Hyper-V server up to an Azure. So we're just going to walk through that. We're not going to do the whole thing of failing out and all of that jazz. You can go look at one of my previous videos. There are two of them that cover how those concepts work. Basically, if you're not familiar at all and you're just like, what in the world is this guy talking about? The thing about Replica is you can take a virtual machine and have it send copies of itself on a regular and scheduled basis out to another location. And for a lot of people, when 2012 first came out, that was to another data center in their environment. And for other folks, this became a thing that they would do for getting their foot into Azure. And I've gotten some fairly decent feedback on folks who've tried out how I showed how to do that. But you just basically are putting together a virtual machine that is very important to you and putting it someplace where you can recover it in case of a disaster. So think of this replica stuff as not a backup, not really something that you would consider so much as a high availability solution. It is certainly not that. This is a disaster recovery solution. This is smoldering ashes in data center, or Bubba with a backhoe hit a T1 line, right? Like any of us still use T1 lines, but they still get cut, right? So you can't get to where you need to go, and so this is a technology that helps you do that. What I really like about this integration with Azure, why it's important to me anyhow, is the fact that now we can get our feet into the cloud, right? This is a great way just to kind of get out and do some cloud stuff. A lot of us out there have Azure accounts. It came with something else we bought. Our sales team packaged it in with some other deal, maybe when you got your Premier contract or whatever that was. However you got to where you are, where you've got access to Azure, even if it's just MSDN and you want to play, here is how you can go about setting this up. So this is an update video. You might want to consider watching one of the previous ones. If you haven't seen the Azure piece to that, there's a very specific video that goes through that. But without further ado, we shall begin with the Azures. So let me get back over to my Azure. So once you're logged into Azure, you'll see this Recovery Services tab. And we can either create new, or we can say create a new vault from right here. You'll see that it brings us right up to this little kind of a wizard walkthrough thingy, and we're going to do a site recovery vault for this. And I'm going to do a quick create. I'm going to throw that out of Australia. Let's do East US, and let's just call this something we can find later, like this is Replica, R-E-P-L-I-C. Did I spell that right? R-E-P-L-I-C-A demo 1, and we create the vault. And so that takes just a few seconds, and we'll have the status running here. Pretty typical Azure type stuff is doing creating. The reason I picked East US is because at the moment East US is in my subscription the only thing I have that we can also create a storage account, and you want to make sure and create your storage account, which we'll get to in a minute, in the same site as where you're going to create these. Otherwise you won't be able to complete the demo. So you may run into the same thing that I did when you do like your MSDN subscription. Sometimes they get congested with things and stuffs, and so those of us who are doing free things, which is what I'm doing, is a non-paid type of example, or type of Azure setup. So anyway, there we go. So it's active, it's showing ready. So the neat thing about this is when I click on the replica demo, it's going to bring up this kind of a getting started page. Now, the pieces here that you answer are going to kind of drive your getting started wizard and not really drive anything about service level. So you might be tempted to say, oh no, I'm enterprise, I want the good stuff. So all this is really doing is driving your wizard from best I can tell. So I'm going to say a developer and I'm evaluating Azure Site Recovery. So this is the cool stuff here. So this gives you an idea of how powerful the solution can be, right? So are we doing an SCVMM site or a VMware only site? Because this works just great with VMware, or a Hyper-V site, which is what we are doing. The previous video I showed you an SCVMM and the wizard looked quite a bit different, so that's one of the reasons it's definitely a good time to come around and do another update to this video. So what are our target? So that's our source. We're coming from a Hyper-V site, not with SCVMM this time. And where are we going? Well, we're only going to Azure here. Right? But we could also send this to another Hyper-V site and manage it in the cloud without ever having to put anything out in the cloud except for the management tools, which makes this a little easier. Same thing with if we had SCVMM or even VMware. So you could go VMware site to another VMware site and manage it right here in Azure. So anyway, what we're doing is Hyper-V in Azure. I'm going to go ahead and click OK, and it kind of drives this little to-do list for us here. So the first thing we need is a Hyper-V site. So we'll click the wizard for Create a Hyper-V site, and we'll call this Replica Hyper-V HVS Demo 1, I guess. And so now it's creating our handy-dandy Hyper-V site for us. And it should take just a couple of seconds. Now we're going to go back and we're going to look at our getting started page, and as I say, we need a registration key. So similar to the last video, we're going to get a prompt to go ahead and download this. You'll notice that I'm using Firefox this time instead of Internet Explorer. So I always want to show that you can do these things with multiple different tools. You know, Microsoft's not going to push you to use Internet Explorer just because that's where we're at. So we're going to go ahead and open that. So we got this handy little funky Vault credentials file that we need to get out to our Hyper-V server. So I'm going to copy that and I'm going to toss that out on the Hyper-V server in question here. I'm just going to throw it out on the desktop. And then back to Azure, we've got the provider we need to download. So when I click on that, you'll see that it pops that up and allows me to save the file. I've already taken the liberty of going ahead and putting that on the server here, so we can go ahead and run it. So we'll go ahead and walk through the install. This is now we're on this 9Z Blade 2. This is a Hyper-V server. So we're going to go ahead and kick off the install. And let's say, do we want to register the server again? Nope. Oh, yes, actually I did. Sorry. Yes. And that's because I had it on there and uninstalled it a moment ago when I suddenly realized I was having to set this up for a completely different thing, and I was like, oh, I bet everybody else wants to see all the new cool stuffs here. Alright, so just existing proxy settings. It's going to ask for the key. That's this thing right here that we downloaded a minute ago, so we'll go out to the desktop and grab that, and we'll go ahead and find okay, the DRA server is already registered in Vault Demo RV1. Either select from the registration key associated with this vault or unregister the server from Demo RV1 and then register it with a different vault. Okay, so this is what happens when we have already got a server and then are changing the settings for this at a later time. So let's see if we go to the Hyper-V settings and then go to replication configuration, and then I know I've done this before because I've made this exact same mistake in the past. So those of you who are not familiar with my Let's Tech episodes and just happen to maybe stumble across my channel, this is how we do Let's Tech. We do not edit out any of the stuff and make it just super simple. We walk through all of our troubleshooting steps and learn together. Okay, so I need that error back, unless it's maybe something in Azure I need to, but if I do that I need to know what the thing was called again. So what's it registered with? It's registered with what? Demo RV1. So Application Vault 1. So let's hop back into Azure. Maybe this is where we need to change it. That is something that is not there anymore. And I probably needed to unregister it before Replica Demo 1. So there's nothing in here. And that's good. But how do we tell this server that we care about it and want to add it into something else? I wonder if it's just something stuck in the registry. It's probably something that if I were to dig around enough in Hyper-V, I'd probably find it, but let's just see if we can get some clues out of the registry. And demo RV1, get that searching. While it's searching, we'll look into the Hyper-V settings and make sure there's not anything else on. Let's see where we go. And we go into, we don't want to remove the server Hyper-V settings. Let's just look through. It's not views, these general views. It wouldn't be in live migrations, storage migrations. I would think it would be in here, but I don't see in replication configuration where we can change any of that. Maybe just turning it off and turning back on. I think before I uninstalled the tool, there was a possibility that there would have been more configuration options. I kind of want to say there are, but how do we install the tool if it's in there? So Azure Site Recovery. Let's make sure that we don't have the Azure Recovery stuffs in here. So let's go into Control Panel and uninstall a program. And I do not see Microsoft Azure Site Recovery part. Let's go ahead and uninstall that. Get rid of it altogether, which I thought we'd already done. Evidently missed some spots. So let's refresh here. Registration. Yeah, there we go. See, it's got crap stuck in the registration. Wonder if I can just blast the whole thing and it not completely foul up the works. We're about to find out. Always back up your registry before you do silly things like that. I'm kind of trouble blasting at the time, so let's see if we can get through this without an issue. And then we'll go, before we go any further, we'll look in Hyper-V and we'll see if we can find where we could have done that before. Okay, we got the install kicked off. It didn't bomb out and give us a big error message, which I was kind of half expecting, honestly. Of course, we haven't got through it all yet. Still things are flashing about on the screen. The agent completed. Alright, so we continue, and it gives us another wizard. So that's something we didn't get before. Did you notice that when we were running through that? We didn't get that kind of first install. We got this second piece. And so perhaps I had... maybe I put that on another Hyper-V server. Is there stuff here? Let's look, because maybe... Nope, it's not here either. Golly darn, I don't know what the heck I did, but whatever. Okay, click. Let's see if it throws an error when we do it this time. Come down here, go get the replication credentials file. Finds it just fine this time. Next. And configuring Azure Site Recovery for registration. So, worked this time. Okay, so note to self. Make darn sure you've really got it uninstalled, because I know that I uninstalled this thing before I did it, but it looks like what may have happened is it picked up the old registration, which is something maybe I needed to clear out. You can clear out the servers, and I'll show you where in Azure just in a moment. Okay, server was registered, and hip hip hooray. So we go back into Hyper-V, and we look at the Hyper-V settings. And there's really not anything else here. I'm not entirely sure if we need to close and reopen the console. Maybe may just not be anything on this side that they have for you to configure, which would make sense because you really want to manage this from the Vault. From Azure. So, nope. All we got here is it's turned on, so I don't know where that got stuck in there. Easy enough to fix, just blasted it out of the register and reinstalled. Nuke, pave, done. Okay, so back to the Azure. Okay, so we've taken care of the next step that it had on there. So we go back into the little getting started page. We've created a site. We've downloaded the registration key and the provider. Now we need a storage account because obviously we need to stick this stuff someplace, right? So we're going to want to put that in East US, and we'll call this replica demo. I want to call that storage 1. And geo redundant, or do we care? Let's just leave it geo redundant. Okay, so it is now provisioning our storage. You'll notice that the page now jumped up to the storage, and it shows us provisioning our storage for this particular part of the deal. Basically, it's just creating a storage blob for us, someplace out in the ether where we can dump files. So for those of you who don't remember, basically what happens is you're going to seed the entire virtual machine via its hard drive and configuration out to wherever it goes, whether it be a local replica or an Azure replica or a site-to-site replica. Once it's completely done its initialized sync out to the cloud, it will go out and start monitoring the VM for changes to the disk, and every time there is its time threshold, whether that be 5 minutes or 30 seconds or whatever you set it up to be, it'll capture all of the changes that have happened to the disk in those last number of minutes or seconds, and then it'll shoot that out so that the remote copy always has an up-to-date version, or at least semi and close to being up-to-date version of your VM. Alright, so back into Recovery Services. We have created our storage account. We can also create a virtual network. So we didn't do that in the previous demo. Might as well go ahead and talk about creating a virtual network, even though we won't use it in this actual demo. So let's say we call this Replica Network 1, and let's do, that's the smallest we can build. Let's throw this one on 172.16, and let's put that in East US, and bang, we've got ourselves a virtual network being created that we won't necessarily need, so we're going to go ahead and let that continue to churn along while we moved on to next steps here. Oh, it's already done. Recovery Services, again, back to the Getting Started page, and we've got group we need to create next. So this is the protection group. You can have a group of one server or bunches of servers, and you treat all of these servers the same. So if we're going to, well, I'll just show you the wizard so you can see the different options that these go with. So we'll call this replica, we'll call it PG for protection group 1, and let's see, we'll go ahead and get this from the replica demo 1 that we created earlier, and the target is going to be Azure, and the storage account is the demo storage that we just created. This would be blank if you had them in 2 different data centers. Learned that the hard way. So you want to make sure and create both of them in the same, so you might want to check it out. I talked about minutes and seconds on the copy frequency. These are little HURL files or HRL files that get created, and those are just differencing files for the disk. So if you were to have a virtual machine running, you wouldn't expect it to just stay stagnant all the time. Things happen on it, right? So as things happen, things get written to the disk. As things get written to the disk, you will see those little files get packaged up and sent off to Azure. Or if you're not running in Azure, just another site. Okay, so recovery points. This is okay. So we talked about this in other videos, but just as a refresher here, this is how many of our recovery points do we want to keep on this VM. What that means is every, let's say, 15 minutes, I'm throwing a new update file, or in your case, you're probably going to pick 30 seconds, right? But every hour, it's going to retain a snapshot of what the VM looked like. So at noon right now, which is what it is my time as of this filming, if I needed to recover back to like 12 midnight, then I would keep 12 recovery points, right? That way I have additional things that I can roll back to. So why don't I just keep like half a dozen of those in there. So there's also application consistent snapshots. In other words, VSS is going to kick off and fire up on that VM, and those will also get retained and copied up to the cloud at whatever frequency you want those to be retained. So you might want to keep like 2 hour, if you're doing like 6 recovery points, you might set it up for every 2 hours. We've got a VSS snapshot that's going to get piled up to the cloud that gives you a full copy that you can do. When do we want to kick off the initial sync of this VM? We could do it right now. Or if you want to wait till, let's say, after your users go home tonight, you might kick it off at like 6 p.m. Right? So I'm going to go ahead and say immediately, because I actually need this to go ahead and get started. Once we kick off which ones we're going to be protecting. So that's just the group, right? So that handles two things. That last question we answered was when we first kick it off, when is it going to go and do its initial rep? But also if the replica sync gets out of sync to an extent that the Hyper-V server decides that it's going to require a full init sync again to get the target machine up to date. If it's going to require a complete and total full sync, then it will wait until whatever time you've told it it's okay for it to do that using that same drop-down menu. That can be very helpful, that if something happens and your VMs get out of sync with the cloud, they don't all suddenly kick off and start sending init syncs and stuff up to the cloud right in the middle of the workday and congesting your network, right? So while that's building, I'm going to run over here to servers. I promised you we'd look and see where you could manage the server and delete it. This is the proper way to delete a server out of your site. So we are looking at servers. When we are sitting in here, we'll notice that the status of the single Hyper-V server that I've connected is showing that it's actually getting updates from it. The two are communicating using the little file we downloaded, which was just easy peasy. There's no link whatsoever between 9Z, my domain that we always use in these episodes, and Azure. They're completely disconnected. They have no idea who each other are. So you can see that I had an authentication mechanism here that worked out just fine. The server and Hyper-V, because I pulled that file down, were able to kind of handshake with each other and say, oh, okay, well, somehow or another our owner says you're cool, so we do our thing. So, okay, so we were creating the protection group. So there we go, back to protection groups. Okay, it is configured and it is set up. So we could go ahead and add virtual machines, but since we've been kind of in the mode of going through the wizard getting started page, we'll roll back to that. You can see that we'll maybe go back to that. There we go, replica demo. So in the bottom of the getting side, the last thing you do is add VMs, obviously, to protect. Which loads up a web page that tells you how to do what we're about to do anyway. So we could have gone and done that. So protected items, we've got the protection groups. We go into the protection groups. We click add a virtual machine, and you'll notice that it's got a list of virtual machines that are already on that server. So if I were to pull up our little Hyper-V server here and put it aside it, you'll see that we've got the 08 cluster node 1 and 2 listed there. We've got the technical preview for Windows Server Threshold listed there. The one thing it found that it didn't like was this one right here, this cluster 1 node 1. That's that VM. We can't back it up because it is a Gen 2 VM that I created. So since Gen 2 VMs are not supported, they won't be listed here as a selectable virtual machine, but Azure Demo is, and so it's now asking me what is the OS, and I say it's Windows, and I say OK. And we're turning on protection of the virtual machine. So in a moment we should be able to see this kick on and go. So we'll take a look at that really quickly and see what it looks like after. Post this part, however, I would say everything is just duplicate to anything that we've done in the past. So I wouldn't torture you guys and make you all sit through here and watch a whole nother set of the demos on how to go through and actually kick a virtual machine over for failover. That's something we've already done before, so no need to go through that again. But one thing I do want to do before we drop off is actually see this thing kick into action. So In the interface, you'll notice I have a replication health thing. By default, this is actually kind of just collapsed, and you just need to come in here and double-click it and pull it up. And so we'll see the status just changed to sending initial replica. You'll see that it's got kind of a little checkpoint that it's billed. That's how it does its thing, and it shows the health is normal. That now gives us the review replication health tab. It is an actual replica now, and down here at the bottom, clicking on replication, you can see initial replications in progress, and we can start seeing some interesting things, whereas this guy obviously shows nothing, not enabled, right? So it's doing its thing, and should start seeding the entire VHD up into Azure Cloud. And once it's finished, it'll be a protected VM that'll be able to recover out into the cloud should anything terrible ever happen. And that's pretty much all of the changes in Azure Hyper-V Replica that I felt you guys needed an update from my previous video. So anyway, guys, this has been Chris with Microsoft, and as always, thank you so much for watching. If you did find anything about this useful or interesting, please give it a quick like. Also, feel free to subscribe to my channel. That'll let you know whenever I've got new stuff that I've uploaded. My blog is also at 9z.com. It's real super easy to remember. It's just the last number and the last letter.com. It's also got links to my Facebook, my LinkedIn, and my Twitter. So again, thanks a ton for listening, and I'll see you guys in the next episode.